Hello everyone, my name is Chris Titley and welcome to the FinTech Australia podcast. The FinTech Australia podcast takes listeners on a deep dive across the FinTech industry in Australia, focusing on the challenges, opportunities and big stories our community faces. Let's get to today's episode. Hi, it's Chris Titley here, and today's FinTech Australia podcast, we're joined by Vinnie D'Alessandro, CPO. I got that one wrong. There you go. That's right. We're not going to edit that out. CPO of Change Financial. Welcome to the little studio we've got here in Brisbane.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Great to be here.
And Vinnie, today we're going to talk all things payments and how Change Financial integrates with that. So the topic today is, the rise in card payments globally, and particularly within Australia, again, where the change fits in and some recent trends. So we get straight into it.
Absolutely.
Card payments globally, or card payments per se. Let's talk about this industry topic.
Sure. So look, when people think about payments, whether it's online or in person at merchants, cards are the first things that come to mind. And even just looking at general banking, people tend to revolve around a debit card or a credit card. And so Change has got a long history in providing those services for banks, credit unions and fintechs. And so what we're looking to do is continue the use of cards, but now using different channels, in particular digital. So you're seeing a lot of movement around cards being available on your phone through Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay. A lot of demand out of market for that. And so we're looking to meld those together so it's a seamless payments experience for people not only in Australia but rest of the world.
And Vinnie, there's multiple ways to pay. I did a podcast recently with another Brisbane-based fintech, and they said there was something along the lines of 200 or 500 different payment methods globally. I mean, what are you seeing, and how does Change, I suppose, integrate with them all?
Oh, look, there definitely are a lot. I think a lot of people are used to the more common payment schemes. So your Visas, your MasterCards, your FPOS. And so we obviously work with them, but we also work with a number of other schemes like Discover, Amex, JCB, China Union Pay. And so our technology can process for any of those different payment schemes, as well as private label schemes. So whether you're thinking about a gift card that you've had at retail stores that can only be used there, we can also support those private networks as well. And so what we're looking to do is really enable people to have that power that sits in their wallet or their phone now and be able to make payments where they see fit. One of the interesting things that we've seen is, despite all these different payment methods coming in, cards are still there. They've been there for decades. They're going to continue to go, and there's a continuing investment from the likes of MasterCard into finding other ways to adapt card payments, in particular with faster payments. So ISO 222, we know that as MPP here in Australia.
Yeah, right. Okay. And then the last couple of years, when it came to the global health pandemic, which we're still seeing some ramifications of when it comes to fintechs and the way that governments at the time said, maybe don't touch cash, and everything went kind of to the card. You talk about that and the shift from that period to where we are now in terms of a normalisation.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Australia was well positioned to deal with the pandemic in terms of payment. People had a lot of cards. They were used to using them, especially for e-commerce. So we saw that grow dramatically. And as you mentioned, that drop-off in cash was quite pronounced, and it hasn't bounced back. And we don't expect it to go back to the levels it was pre-pandemic. What we do want to see, though, is we want to see movements in the merchant space to deal with the digital cards that you see on your phone. And again, Australia is very well placed for that. But in other regions, in particular in the US, they're quite far behind the Australian market. So we're looking to take that technology into other regions and other countries to try and help them speed up a little bit and catch up to the Australian way of paying.
Let's delve into the US from a high level point of view. Venmo was very, very popular, and we saw the peer payments sort of come along, but there's still a little bit of archaicness, I suppose, in terms of the way people get paid and the check system. I mean, the check system is sort of coming out a little bit here, but still quite prevalent in the US.
It's absolutely incredible. There's still a large majority of people that get paid via checks. And a lot of that is driven by there's still a significant amount of the US market underbanked. So around 7% of the community do not have access to bank accounts, which is very different to Australia. We're sub 1%. But what that means is the checks have been prevalent and continue to be. So what we're seeing in the US market, in particular around some of our opportunities, is these salary cards. They're actually based around a prepaid card, so they don't have a debit account attached to it, but it allows the American consumers and employees to get their pay into a card product so that they can use the funds more easily. Typically, people without a bank account have to take their their check down to a cash checker. They pay a fee to get the funds that they own. And then use that as a payment method. So now we're looking to move that into a card so it's cheaper, faster, and gets them on the road to financial stability.
Yeah, no, and the underbanked market you mentioned there, I mean, we sort of take it for granted here in Australia to sort of open a bank account with some ID, but in the US there's probably some sort of criteria around, credit scores and FICO scores and all those things that happen. I mean, it's not really a major problem here, but it sounds like a big problem in the US.
Look, it is, and that's why we see such a demand for prepaid card products in the US. They have a lower barrier for entry in terms of KYC and credit scoring, and so it allows people to get access to financial products, get to be known by banks and other FinTechs, and that helps build their credit score over time, and that gives them access to other things like bank accounts and loans in the future.
When it comes to trends in regards to having cards, I mean, Visa and MasterCard, you said people will come to mind. There's debit cards, there's credit cards, there's prepaid cards, and we've got buy now, pay later cards, etc. Are you seeing some sort of shift in terms of how people are using their cards?
Look, we definitely are. We're seeing people are looking for more features with their cards. So the ability to pay it at a merchant and tap and go is pretty common, and it's available with every card. What we're starting to see are integration with apps, particularly saving functions. So the ability to quarantine some of your money in a saving account so that you can change the way that you pay. So there's a lot of financial literacy engagement that's coming on, and there's a few Australian fintechs focusing quite heavily on that. Hello Clever's a good example, and people are looking to blend that into the card experience. So you'll start to see more apps, banking apps that have that sort of financial literacy component in there. The other thing is around transaction enrichment, is being able to see that you've made a payment, but getting some more granular details around who the merchants were, what type of business, but also categorization, so you can see where you are spending your money.
And with that, you probably have, the digital capabilities of some of the banks that talk to these cards and that rise of the digital banks, etc. You mentioned about sort of the value add from the consumer. There's a whole another world in loyalty, and I think the US market's pretty strong in terms of their loyalty points, etc. Where do you think that might fit in?
Yeah, look, that's a really big focus now for us. So we've got the ability to track loyalty spending down to a merchant level, which is great. And people are now using that data to get better product offerings out to their consumers and clients. And so we're talking with quite a few loyalty integrators that are looking to bring their products into the card payment space. And as you said, that the granular data you can get out of there is really important for merchants to understand what are their customers spending their money on. Where can we best add value through discounts and loyalty points? And so we'll expect those financial literacy and loyalty to be those value adds we see in cards over the coming years.
And Vinnie, during the global health pandemic, everyone's sort of checking in and checking out everywhere using QR code on their phone, and I sort of remember having to download the QR app initially, but now I think it's pretty functional on most mobile devices through the camera function. But then you go to a restaurant now and you can sit down and pay for things using a QR code. It seems to be quite popular in Asian countries, but not overly popular here in terms of QR pay. And the US, what do you think about sort of tap and go with QR codes?
Yeah, look, I think the lack of sort of momentum in Australia is due to the fact that we did have that tap and go quite early. People are quite common with it. Personally, I can't remember the last time I actually signed for a payment. Yep. It'd have to be 4 or 5 years ago. And so people have been quite open to that. Whereas in the Southeast Asian region, and in particular in the US, chip and pin still isn't really in every merchant. And so you're starting to see these QR codes coming out.
Yep.
What we definitely have seen, as you mentioned, is people got used to using QR codes. They sort of seem like a dark art, but now even my parents know about and how to use them. So now that's going to, I think, help with growing around QR payments. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be huge in Australia. We will see it increase over time, but because we've got those existing really fast payment options, we're likely to see those stay ahead of the game.
And that fast payment options is probably a combination of multiple things in terms of the people accepting it, but also the big tech companies behind it, like Apple, that allow you to have that functionality. Where do you think they might sit in the scheme of payments?
Oh, look, absolutely. Apple's making a huge play in the payment space. So very shortly, they'll be releasing the ability to take payments from your phone. And we see that disrupting the acquiring market, those people that have point of sale terminals, because anyone could turn into a merchant. So I've got an iPhone in my pocket now, the ability to take a payment from you, Chris, from a traditional card on my phone.
If you're a tradie or something, you come over and do the plumbing, for instance, and there's your phone. That's it, right?
Absolutely. And so that disruption, you're starting to see these technology companies turning into fintechs or expanding. And then obviously we saw Apple release their own card in the US. And so they're really heavily focused on that. So they're trying to build that ecosystem out that started with their app store, that started with taking funds in that method, but they're going down those traditional rails like cards and acquiring, which is really interesting to see.
I caught up with someone recently who had just attended the Money 2020 in Las Vegas, and he said to me one of the trends was around sort of reg tech and KYC and anything to do with money laundering and CTF.
Yep.
It's been a few data breaches here in Australia, etc. Sort of put people a little bit alert on their data, but not so much on money, but more on scams and things. And how important is that now in terms of your business and what is happening from a sort of macro point of view?
Yeah, huge. Look, it's huge for us. It's a big for us in the US because we have card programs and we support our clients with KYC. So we build that into our mobile app. And now in Australia and New Zealand, as we're becoming a direct issuer through MasterCard, it's critical for us to make sure we meet our obligations around AML and CTF. So for us, it's about knowing who our customers are, the most important thing, but also making that experience frictionless. So being able to do it online through a mobile app or through a portal is really critical. But that gives us access to a lot of data in the background that we use to analyse, make sure we're dealing with the right people. It's really important from a policy perspective, and ASIC has a lot of focus on it. But sort of coming back to the data breach is that data protection is really critical. So being a card issuer, we have PCI DSS, which is a very high level of security requirements around protecting our customers' personal information as well as their card information. So we take security very seriously. We've been doing this for well over a decade, working with some of the larger banks in Latin America and Southeast Asia. So we're quite comfortable in that space, that heavily regulated space. But the issues we've seen out of market recently is bringing a greater focus. So we expect to see a tightening of resources. There's only a limited number of resources in the Australian market around data security. And so I think we'll see a bit of a battle for talent over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and obviously if there is some sort of breach at some point in time and or even just, the age-old your card gets copied and gets spent everywhere with the tap and go, for instance, the ability to be able to switch it off straight away. I mean, that's sort of a new tech. It's kind of, I don't know whether every bank has that facility, but it seems to be one that makes common sense.
Oh, look, it's that sort of proactive security where at a transaction level, if you see some behaviour that doesn't quite look right, the banks are on it, and our platform has that same sort of technology. So if you see multiple transactions in one country and then suddenly one in a completely different country, and that's within a few minutes, you can start to see that behaviour is not correct, and our systems will alert us.
Yep.
And we can then go reach out to the client. We can block transactions and to protect not only our clients but ourselves.
Just on that tap and go limit, I get a little bit confused. At first, I think it started at $100 and then it sort of went up, and then I think each bank has their own. I don't know. Is there a mandated limit at the moment?
I think there's an overall limit, and then the banks sort of choose where they feel their comfort level is. We did see an increase during the COVID pandemic to give people a little bit more flexibility. But it really does come to the risk profile of each of the banks and also the card products that they're using. Look, it's for me, I'm probably not out there buying a lot of those big ticket items where I'm worried about it. But in my general sort of, go and do some shopping for the week, I'm finding that it's in the sweet spot for me. And we're getting the same sort of feedback from our clients is there's not a lot of sort of declines or people get worried about putting a pin in for a large transaction.
Yeah, just you mentioned the word pin there. I think with all those transactions in the sweet spot, you mentioned the old pin in your head sometimes might disappear, and it might be, in its own right, people forget the pin and go, oh, how do I do that again? That's a process in its own right because we're so used to tap and go now in Australia.
I had a moment the other day where I had to think really carefully about what my PIN was. I was used to having it, sort of my facial recognition on my phone.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny how quickly we can move away from something that was, absolutely critical on a daily basis.
Yeah.
It's now, it's getting a little bit more difficult.
I also remember the old savings or debit or savings or credit check. Which one do you want to choose when you put your card in? That sort of. It's disappeared a little bit with the type of card. I mean, it's still there in some ATMs, etc. But I'm wondering, down the track there might be a merger of the card again in terms of credit, debit, it chooses for you or something crazy in the future.
Oh, look, absolutely. There's a bit of push around least cost routing. So looking at which card scheme do you push the transactions down for the least cost for the consumer or the merchant. So obviously, FFOS Australia is very keen to see that go through. And you can see a few cards like Upbank that have the ability for you within your Apple Pay to choose whether it's FPOS or go through the MasterCard rails.
Right. Yep.
So that choice is out there now with some of the providers. And we expect that choice to probably become a little bit more visible over the next couple of years.
Got a couple more questions before we wrap it up. And one is the ability for people to pay using your mobile phone or email using Osco, etc. It seems to me that it's quite comfortable for us to do that with friends and family, but you still go out to dinner and people are, send us your bank details.
Yes.
It's never sort of like, oh, you can just send my mobile phone, do it now. Oh, okay, I didn't know that. The public perception is still probably a little bit light where I think it probably should be.
Oh, look, I would agree. We're a big fan of ISO 222, that sort of MPP instant payments. Australia's probably up there. The UK as well have got great penetration, could always be better. We have our PaySim testing solution that allows banks and fintechs to test their ISO 222 payments. So we're very interested in that space. And we see now the US market, the Federal Reserve over there is looking to release that out into the banks over the next 3 to 5 years, which is fantastic. I think we've got some of it right in terms of people's knowledge of it. Like right now, when someone transfers me money, I expect that within a few seconds, whereas previously it was like, I'll check in a day or two.
You might get it on Tuesday.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that expectation's there, but the actual Pay ID and being able to use email addresses and mobile phones, that just hasn't really had that same penetration. No. But we are seeing MPP putting a lot more investment into that. So we will start to see that come out a little bit more. And also it's up to the banks as well to educate their clients. Their customers on how to use those products. But look, it's again just another great way to pay in this sort of digital and low touch environment.
No, for sure. One final question then, sit here in 12 months' time or even 2 years' time. 2 or 3 years ago, you know your PIN off by heart, but now we don't know our PINs because we're tapping and going everywhere. Sure. Is there a trend that you're seeing or something that you think that might be a little bit radical in terms of payments, but where we could be in a couple of years' time?
Look, there's a couple of things. I think the first one is moving away from plastic, but in two different directions, right? So one of those is to look at more environmentally friendly
card issuers.
Yes, So bamboo, we're seeing metal options as well. So I think that move away from plastic.
There must be a lot of plastic cards in Australia.
A huge amount, yeah.
There's, I don't know, 50 million maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think on average people have about 1.7 cards, I think, each. So it's got it's right up there. And that's the same sort of figure in most regions. So I think moving away to a more sustainable card is one thing. Yep. The other thing is actually zero cards, is moving purely to digital, using your phone and actually not having a wallet. At the moment, I think I only take my wallet around when I need my driver's license. And then even in New South Wales, they've got a digital driver's license. So I think over the next couple of years, you'll start to see digital-only card products. And we'll actually, at some point, stop talking about cards. That might be a couple of decades away, and it's all done through our phones. No,
that's right. The old wallet, it's still stacked with loyalty cards in my household, but Yeah, there's but you're right. I mean, taking it out, you really can. If you had your ID on it, for instance, if you needed your ID or your Medicare or something in an emergency, then you can take just your phone out and the old wallet sits at home.
Absolutely.
Vinnie, great to chat. Thanks so much for coming on to the FinTech Australia podcast and telling us all about what's happening in payments and what's happening at Change and how you're integrated within the ecosystem, and really look forward to catching up.
Great. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for listening to the FinTech Australia podcast. I'm your host, Chris Titley. The FinTech Australia podcast is a collaboration between FinTech Australia and Sub11. For more information about membership options, news and the events coming up, jump on to the FinTech Australia website. Have a great day. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.